Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the final week, week 4. Thanks for making the short trip here with me. I've kind of been thinking about how to tie this up and put a bow on it for everyone. And we've spent the last 3 weeks talking a lot about taking stuff away. So we started with being committed, right? And then we talked about discipline and the budgeting piece. And then we talked about contentment. And through all of it, kind of the overriding theme was that you should be happy with less. And things get a lot easier when you're happy with less. And, as any typical, human and particularly American, that doesn't sit well with me, right? Because when I put in a lot of work, I expect reward. And I think that most people feel that way about effort and dedication, that type of stuff. And so we've gotten to the point now where we've gone through these steps of, making a decision to kind of ask, what does God want us to do with the money? And then kind of looking at our finances to try to figure out what's extra, what can we do? And then taking the next step of, again, being okay with less than maybe we have today or less things. And so now we're to the end, and now where's the pot of gold, right? And so the pot of gold for us is being a blessing. And I think that you might be surprised at the way I'm going to put it out there, because it's not always what you think, because people think that being a blessing, you frequently hear the words "have a blessed day," or you hear that a lot, or "I feel blessed," right? And I'm going to look at it just a little differently than that. So, what is blessing? Well, the definition is these are the acts or words of one that blesses. Okay, great. Now we have approval and encouragement. So I want to spend a little time on that and just saying that part of being a blessing to others is encouraging them and helping them, right? That's part of what being a blessing is. But really where we want to spend the time is a thing conducive to happiness or welfare. And so as we look at what being a blessing is, we're really talking about happiness or welfare. And you got to remember that being a blessing is an outward action, right? I can't bless myself. I suppose I could. It doesn't work very well. So it's an outward, it's about other people, right? And a lot of what I've talked about over the last 4 weeks has been about putting other things ahead of me or you, right, ourselves. And so we want to think about this, what is conducive to happiness and welfare, and we're going to look at it in some circles of influence that we have. So we're going to talk about our family and our community and the world in total. So what does it mean to be a blessing, right? Because blessing someone doesn't necessarily make you a blessing. It requires personal commitment to be a blessing. You have to be committed to doing that. You have to care. You have to be engaged, right? You can't be wishy-washy. You can't not care and still be a blessing. Does that make sense? You have to be engaged. And you can be a blessing through a whole host of things, which could be kind words. It could be through actions, through money, through things. But being a blessing is you being committed to caring about other people. But you have to be careful about blessing, because it can become, we'll call it humble bragging. Okay? So you have to take this test when you're being a blessing. Is it a humble brag? And the way I want to explain this is that for those of you who are on Facebook or Twitter, you see people who will post pictures of their vacation or the new gift they just got, and then they hashtag it, right, with the word blessed, right? And so is that really them being blessed, or is that humble bragging, right? And so you got to be careful about how you share your own blessings. And certainly I have to pull myself back on this a lot, because I've been blessed in so many ways. And so I come across very forward sometimes, especially when it comes to finances. And sometimes I have to dial myself back and be like, wow, that really sounds like bragging and not trying to help, not trying to be that person, that voice for them. So you have to be careful that it's not designed to make others envious of you, right? So when we go through this financial balance and we reach the point where we feel like, for the time being at least, that we're financially balanced, you can kind of jump up and down and be like, man, I've reached it, and if you're doing it in a positive way, it can really impact people positively. And if you're not doing it in a positive way, it really seems like you're bragging to other people that aren't finding that same balance, right? So you got to be real careful with that. And then you have to ask yourself, is being a blessing always being positive? It's always positive if you're really trying to help and care, but is it always delivered in a positive way? And I don't think it necessarily is. Because sometimes being a blessing, you have to tell people the harsh truth in love, right? And that's not always easy to hear or easy to understand, but sometimes being a blessing financially means saying no. And sometimes that's tough, because you want to say yes, but sometimes it's the right answer at that time for that person for a no answer, okay? So let's take a look at what the Bible says about blessing just a little bit here. So in Hebrews 13, it says, "Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God." And in the Bible, there's much discussion about blessing. A lot of it is not about financial blessing. It's about spiritual or physical, or there's a number of other ways that people are blessed. We're gonna talk mostly about the tangible stuff, the money, the things, right? And this speaks directly to that. In Proverbs 11, it says, "Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. The people curse him who holds back grain, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it." And so this kind of begs the question. And here it is. Is the best way to receive financial blessings yourself is to give blessings to others? Because God says that the one who waters will himself be watered, right? He's saying, look, if you give, I'll provide. And so this is a little bit of what I've been talking about for the last couple weeks, about you have to think about others first and yourself second. So the interesting thing is, as I was doing research for this week, I was Googling, right? So the 2000s term, right? I was Googling, and I searched how to get financial blessings, right? So I was looking at it from a purely, I'm going to say, about me, right? How do I get financial blessings? Just to see what the internet said. And the interesting thing is that the number one response, right? So Google ranks their responses based on views and all kinds of things, right? But the first one that came up, and I opened it up, and it says, the best way to get financial blessings for yourself is to give. I was like, that's pretty freaking cool, right? And it really talked about the tithe and about how when people tithe, they are automatically more blessed than they were before they did. And it's crazy how that works. So I do think that the best way to bless yourself is to make an effort to bless others. And whether that's financially or with words or with actions, I think that it's the way that we need to approach our financial life. And the thing is that, so when you're young and you are spending every dollar, it seems completely counterintuitive that you would take a dime and give it to anybody else, and to think that it's going to be for my benefit, right? And as a young person in my 20s, I was there, right? How could me giving you a dime positively impact me? And as I've gotten older, I realized that the only way for me to positively impact me is to give you more than the dime, right? But to give you $1 or 10 or 20, right? As much as I can afford to do in a responsible manner. So how does financial balance enable us to be a blessing to others in our social circles? And so as you kind of continue past tonight, right, and as you think about your financial health and make those adjustments, and they're going to come, right, because even when you achieve financial balance for a short period of time, then something else happens and it's different, right? Life changes quickly. And so thinking about this, so thinking about your spouse, right? So what's the number one cause of divorce? Money, right? It's clear, right? Money issues. Number one item to argue about, and the number one source or cause of divorce. So if you can get yourself in a financially good place, in a balanced place, you are going to eliminate a large portion of the arguments that occur in a household, right? And that's the easy way to look at it, to say you're going to reduce that. But it also does something further than that. Because when you and your spouse are on the same page, it clears up expectations, right? So when somebody, if my wife is in the store, she knows that we've already had this discussion, right? And so there's an expectation, her of me and me of her, and we're on the same page. And so she isn't wanting or needing things that we haven't already agreed that aren't right for us financially, right? So it clears up that expectation between each other. But the other interesting thing is that it allows us to say yes to our spouse more often. And the reason I think that it does that is that when we have those expectations laid out and we've agreed on this is where we want to be, when the requests come, they've already made a good decision. Right? So when my wife and I talk about financial decisions, very rarely is it a no? It's a let's talk about it further, or let's figure out how we can make that happen, right? Because we both have each other in mind, and so, I'm not going out and as much as I'd like to, buy the new Harley, right? Because it's not financially in our plans right now. So I'm not even going to her with that request. I'm not pining for that, right? Because we've already decided that. And so when I go to her with a request, I know that it's already within our bounds. And so she's 90% more likely to say yes, or to work with me to achieve what I'm trying to achieve. Does that make sense? And so from a spouse perspective, it just makes life more pleasant. And so one of our recent discussions that we had was about cell phones, right? When I've talked about cell phones frequently here. So she has an iPhone, and her iPhone recently, I would say over the last 2 months, the battery life has changed dramatically. And so she went from going for 2 or 3 days with a battery charge to now where it'll be like 4 or 5 hours. And so her immediate request was, I think it's time for a new phone. Great, right? I mean, one of my least favorite purchases ever are these little electronic leashes that I carry in my pocket, right? I mean, I hate spending money on it. And so but I said, okay, if that's what you think you want, great. Let's do some research and make a good choice. And of course, like my first thought was, don't get the 10, it's $1,000, right? I mean, that was my first thought. And so we started doing a little research, and then a day later, she comes to me and she goes, you know what? She goes, I've been thinking about this. She said, it'll only cost me $100 to get the battery replaced. Let's just do that. And I'm like, score, right? Right? I mean, but what I'm saying is that she understands that, and she agrees that this is not a fun purchase. This isn't something that we're like, hey, let's go get new cell phones. It's more a problem than anything. And so, we came to this conclusion without really even talking about it, right? It was kind of cool. I was like, this is pretty sweet, right? Okay, so past your spouse, now you have your second layer, which is your kids. And I think this is really where it gets kind of cool. Because when you can teach your kids how to be financially, okay, without a lot, you make an impact on them that is going to last their lifetime. And so I think that a lot of people in our society today, they expect like the school to teach financial well-being. And it just doesn't happen, right? That's our job as parents. And it's interesting because I think that the better our kids know that we are financially balanced, they just fall into line, right? They just kind of, they just take up those values and they agree, right? Because this is how life works. But it also allows them to take on more responsibility. Again, and we talked about the passage earlier, if God can't trust you with a little, then he's certainly not going to trust you with a lot, right? And I think that goes for our kids, is that if you can teach your kid how to be really good with a little bit of money, all of a sudden, them having a little more is not a big deal because they really don't care. And so to give you again, personal perspective here. So I told you about how we run my son's, his allowance. And so he gets $8 a week, and out of that $8, he must set aside $2 in the bank of mom and dad, right, which is his savings. 25% of his money goes to savings. 25% of his money goes into charity or giving. And then he gets to spend the other half, the other $4. And like, I need to start borrowing money from this kid, right? Because I went into his room and I was like, how many singles do you have in here? Right? I mean, like, he's got a stack of singles. And I'm like, we need to go, like, put that in the bank. I didn't even realize that it had gotten that large, because he'll go out and buy stuff from time to time, but he's just not the materialistic, the typical kid who, I mean, like, when I was young, you give me $1, I mean, like, I have it spent in like 32 seconds, right? And I probably ate the candy that I bought before I got home, right? I mean, that was how I operated, right? And in him, I can give him, and in fact, he won't even come and ask for his allowance for like 3 or 4 weeks. Because then when he asks for it, he can ask for a 20, right? I mean, because that's it's much cooler for him to get 20s than singles, And so he's like, hey, Dad, you owe me 5 weeks. He's like, I think I need a $20 bill. I'm like, okay. So it's kind of funny. But the other thing for him, and so talking about, we're right around the corner here from Christmas, is that I found that the more that we've talked to him about being financially responsible, his Christmas expectations have changed, which was completely unexpected. And the coolest thing happened last year, because I went to him and I said, look, I would like to know, if money was no issue, right? If you could have anything in the world for Christmas, what do you want? And he looked at me and he said, I got to think about it. I said, okay. So a few nights later, I was taking him to bed, and I asked him, and I said, hey, have you thought about what I asked? And he said, yeah, I've thought about it. He said, I've thought about it a lot, actually. I said, okay. I said, so what did you come up with? And what I was trying to get at is, I was trying to understand what's his pie in the sky? If I could be like the coolest dad that ever walked the earth, what is it? What's the thing, right? And my brain's in things for kids, right? Excuse me. And he says, Dad, he said, I don't want anything I can buy. And I'm like, you're 9, Like, how can you want something that you can't buy? And I said, okay. I said, so what is it that you want? He said, well, he goes, honestly, he's like, I'd like more time in summer. And I'm like, cool. Me too, right? And then he said, I'd like to be able to control my temper better. I'm like, how did we hit the jackpot here, right? And while I can't provide those things for Christmas, I can certainly help him with that stuff on the side, right? And so we come to this year, right? So that was his answer last year, right? And so we come to this year, and I ask the same question. What's on the list? And he says, the only thing he wants is a Pokemon game. Right? I mean, of all the things that he could ask us for, and that we're able to provide him, he wants a $35 game. And I'm like, okay, what else is on the list? He said, nothing. That's it. And I'm like, this is proof that a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, right? I mean, because certainly this wasn't what we were aiming for, but it's really kind of neat to see. So then you move outside of the immediate family, and then you talk about family and friends and what your influence is on them. And for family and friends, what being financially balanced gives you is it gives you the opportunity again to say yes when it means the most. And what I mean by that is that there will be times when your family's going to call, and they're going to say, look, I'm in a spot. And of course, what they're going to do is they're going to phrase it as, can I borrow money? Right? I think we've all been there. Would you agree? And so it puts you in a spot where you can say yes. but even more so as a person who's learned from experience, I don't like lending money to family. So what I like to do is I like to say yes, but it's not a loan, right? It's a gift. This is the way that we can be a blessing to them, because it's never easy to go to a sibling or somebody else in your family and ask for money. And so clearly they're in a spot. And so it gives you the opportunity to make those yeses more often. But then additionally with your friends, and we'll keep including family here, it allows me to be a blessing unexpectedly more often. And what I mean by that is, just doing silly stuff like buying a meal or a beer or sending, flowers or doing those types of things, right? Which are completely unexpected and unnecessary. And those are kind of the best ones to be able to do. So then outside of that, then you have your community. Now, when you're financially balanced, you're able to do things for your church and your local nonprofits who are making a positive impact on your community. And truthfully, they're doing work that I don't want to do, right? Frequently, that's the case, right? It's stuff that needs to be done, but they have a heart for it. And so I'm happy to help them financially to do that because I see that it needs done in the community. So you can be a blessing in your community by devoting more time and money and effort to those churches and nonprofits that are doing good things. And it's crazy, but I think that it has a real impact on the world, because over the last 50 years, we have become a me-centered world, right? It's all about what I have and what I can keep. And I think that as you become a blessing to others, it encourages them, without you saying a word, to also be a blessing to others. And so there's this ripple effect that occurs when you do things that are completely unexpected or even expected, right? I mean, when you do things that are out of the goodness of your heart and you're a blessing to others, it encourages everyone else who sees that to be a blessing. And we see this sometimes on like Facebook and Twitter, because they go crazy, right? So somebody will post online that something happened to them, and all of a sudden it'll become viral, and there will be 1 million views on this particular story, right? And we've seen stories, I don't know if you guys have seen these, but there's been stories of things like a waitress who works at a restaurant, and there was a story of an older guy who went in and sat with at this woman's table every day, and she needed a car. And so he comes in one day, and her tip was the keys, right? How cool is that, right? I mean, I want to be that guy, right, that's able to do that. And that kind of stuff goes viral. And so even when we're talking about strangers, people that we don't even know, when we're financially balanced, we are generally less stressed, right? We're generally better human beings when we don't have to worry about this, right? Would you agree with that? And so I can't tell you how many times I've been in, Walmart or Target, and you can just tell somebody who's in line and who is just completely stressed about how much the bill's going to be and whether they have enough money to cover it. And of course, then they take that out on other people, right? And because there's anger and stress. And so it allows us to be better people. And so the interesting thing about money is that when we're all about us, we have to, by definition, neglect everybody else. Okay? And so Mark Batterson, who's a pastor at a church in Washington, D.C., I like his quote. It says, "When God blesses you financially, don't raise your standard of living, raise your standard of giving." Right? Because I had enough before I got more, I'll still have enough if I give more. Does that make sense? And so, just out of curiosity, and I kind of wrote a list here, are there ways, what are the ways do you think that you could be a blessing to other people anonymously? I'm looking for some input here. Time. How with time? Give your time to them. So just be there for them, right? Be an ear, listen, counsel, yeah? Is that what you're saying? Good? Okay, I agree. Yes, 100%. Show up when they're not expecting to be there. What else? Anonymously blessing others. It does, right. So she said when we're at work, we do our best for not our boss, but for the greater good. Absolutely. And, you know, God wants us to work, not like we're working for someone else, but like we're working for him, right? He's the boss. So yeah, I agree with that. Yep. So what do you think in your day-to-day life? Because I came up with a few that, well, here, I'll share what I came up with. So picture this, if this could happen. So let's say you're at the drive-thru at McDonald's, right? And you go through and you order your 2 McDoubles and your small fry, and it comes to $5, right? And you hand the lady a 10, or the person at the window, right? Not necessarily a lady, but you hand the person at the window a $10 bill. And they go to hand you your $5 in cash. You say, you know what, just go ahead and put it on the next person's tab. It doesn't matter that they don't know it was you. It's even better that they don't, right? Unless you have a Pittsburgh Steelers bumper sticker, and then it matters, but I'm kidding. That was for Bob. So what about stuff like making dinner for a family who you know is in, they're suffering from a physical problem or they've had a tough week, right? And just showing up with dinner cooked or ready in a crock pot, right? Have you guys heard about the layaway stories at Walmart? Yeah, so a couple of you have. So there's been this rash of, we'll call them, random acts of kindness, right? But every year now, for the last probably 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's been somebody who anonymously will go into a Walmart and they'll swipe their credit card for like $30,000 and pay off as many layaways as they can without anybody knowing, right? Like that's pretty cool. You could send flowers to somebody without a card, right? Or a card that just says, "Hope you have a great day." Because I don't know anybody that doesn't appreciate that kind of, unexpected blessing. One of the best ways to do it, though, is to pray for somebody, right? Maybe somebody that isn't even on the prayer chain, somebody who you just know they could use another line, right? Another line up to God. And so praying is a great way to bless somebody without being, out in the open, with being anonymous. And so I think there's a whole lot of ways that we can do this. So Luke talks about expectations. And in Luke chapter 12, it says, "But someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. When someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required." And so as we kind of move forward from this week, I think it's important that we kind of look introspectively to say, how much have I been entrusted with? Is it a lot? Because for me it is, right? I know that I've been entrusted with a lot, and so I also know that God expects a lot, right? And that's not of me, of my finances, but of my time and my thoughts and my actions, my deeds, right? And so I think you need to kind of take a self-check and kind of figure out maybe what God is expecting. So what does he expect of us? Well, I think that he expects a few things. I think the first thing that he expects of us is that he expects us to be good stewards of what he has provided. Okay, and what that means is that everything comes from him. We talked about this in the very first class, or the very first workshop, right? Everything comes from him, and his expectation is that we are going to do with it good things, right? That we're going to do what he expects of us with the gifts he's provided. So I think that's the first thing that he expects. But past that, I think that he expects us to care for the people who are less fortunate than we are in the same way that he has cared for us. And so if you're someone like me who feels like I've just been heaped blessings, it's my expectation that I need to also do that, right? That I need to put it out there. Because he doesn't just give it to me for free, right? It doesn't work that way. He gives it to me and expects me to pass it along in a like manner. I also think that he expects us to act as his ambassador. He built us in his image, right? And his expectation of us is that we are his representation. So part of what we do as Christians is that we are to try to walk as straight a path as we can, to act like he sent us, right? And part of that is making disciples of other people, and that's what our calling is. That's the commission, right? That's the Great Commission. And so he expects us to use the tools that he's provided to bring more people to him. And in a lot of ways, it doesn't seem like our financial well-being should be tied to our evangelism, but in a lot of ways it is, right? Because it's just another one of the gifts that he's provided to us, another one of the tools that he's given us to do the work that he expects us to do. Does that make sense? Okay. So I have given you guys each a gift card, right? And I think there are a few folks, 1, 2, who doesn't have one yet? 3, 4. Hey, Joey, can you grab these for me? Please. Thanks. You can just toss them back there. I appreciate it. Okay. So one of the questions when you guys came in, obviously, I tried to buy you guys, nice candy last week, and this week it's gift cards. And so one of the questions was, What are they for? And are they activated? Yeah, good call there. So here's the deal. I have a job for all of you. So all of these cards are real. They're fully funded, right? And they might be for you, but they might not. And I'm going to let you decide that. Okay? And what I want you to think about is, okay, first of all, if you are a person who really could use this gift card, then the way I want you to approach this is my gift to you, okay? And I want you to use it. And if you think that you might know somebody or not know somebody, and I'll get to that in a second, that could use it more than you, then I have a job for you all. When what I'd really like to see is this. So they're Acme gift cards, right? Does everybody frequent an Acme at least occasionally? Does everybody step foot in there? Okay. So what I'd like you to do as an exercise is I would like you to find someone in an Acme that you don't know. You don't know their situation. You don't know how much money they have, how many kids they have. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? I want you to find somebody in an Acme, and I would like you to go and pass it along. And I cannot tell you, because I've done this, the joy that it brings. And what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to do a couple things. Number one, I don't want you to attach this to any holiday, specifically Christmas, because it's not about Christmas, right? What I would like you to use it as, because you're going to hand it to somebody, and the first thing they're not going to believe it's real, right? And so you need to explain, this is a real gift card, and I'd like you to have it. And they're going to ask you why. And you're going to respond and say, I want to be a blessing to somebody today. And if they say, I don't need it, then your response is this. Okay? Because you're going to have people that say that I don't need it, right? Certainly, if you gave me the gift card, I'm going to say, give it to somebody who needs it more than I do, right? So your response, what I would like your response to be is, that's great, then pass it along to somebody who does. Okay? Because what happens when we start this kind of ripple, I would imagine that sometime between now and in the next couple weeks, I'll see it float to the surface on Twitter or Facebook. Right? And you don't need to tell them your name, where you're from, why you're doing it, right? It's because it's not important. Not important. See, it's real easy to kind of know somebody's situation and, have them be an integral part of your life and be a blessing to them. It's easier to do that than to go to some unknown person, this stranger, and to make that kind of offering to them, right? And so I just want to see, I'm kind of interested to see how this experiment goes, right? So there are 21 cards in circulation, okay? And so I'm interested to see how often or how frequently it percolates up in the social media world, right? And so when we talk about what that financial pot of gold is at the end of being, doing all the work and cutting and living with less and, doing the right things, whatever we deem to be the right things, that pot of gold at the end is both the joy that we get by sharing what we have, and who knows, maybe somebody is moved to come to church next week, or moved to do the same thing to somebody else. Because when I've seen the things online, on Facebook and whatnot, when somebody goes through a toll booth and pays for the next 10 people in line, hands them a $20 bill and just says, use it until it runs out. That what tends to happen behind them is that the next person hands them $5 when their bill's only $1 and says, put it in the pot. Then the next person puts in $5, and all of a sudden now that you've paid for the next 40 because you've caused people to think a little differently than they thought 5 minutes ago, right? And so for me, when it comes to kind of the end zone, the goal line, what's at the end, it's this ability to do things that people normally don't think about doing, right? And I think that's kind of the biggest gift that we give ourselves. So I knew this was going to be short tonight, right? Which is also my gift to you, right? So you guys have some homework, right? We have a few things. So first of all, you have your gift card that I'd like you to think about. And again, I want to tell you this. If you are in a situation today where you could really use it, use it. And in fact, if you are in that situation, see me after, I'll give you another one. Okay? But if you're not, then I'd like you to go out and be a blessing to others. And continue, please, to work on the other things we've talked about, the budgeting, the God money, the contentment. Because alone, any of those things doesn't work. You have to kind of achieve it together, learn to live with a little less, and learn to give a little more, right? All right, so there's your homework. Be a blessing to somebody else, and thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun. I hope this has been a good experience for you guys. So thank you.